The dynamics around Ondo Finance are very interesting. On the one hand, we've got an increasing capital base that gets locked up in the protocol. On the other hand, the price performance has been rather lackluster recently. The question is this potentially an opportunity to buy low now in order to then sell high later? Let's have a look at the on-chain metrics, the data most people are not considering. Now, I've published several videos on Ondo Finance before on this channel. The first one outperformed the average video by quite a bit. It got a lot of attention. The subsequent videos still outperformed. So there was a lot of attention quite constantly. But the recent video published 2 weeks ago, that actually just performed according to average. So it seems like there is apathy among investors. The people that have bought Ondo are now mainly in the losses and they don't want to hear that much about the asset anymore. But maybe that's an opportunity. Here is Ondo Finance's price development long term. We had been above $2 at one point. Now we are at 77 cents. At the same time, this is how much money is locked in the protocol. So over time, we see consistent growth. We are now at $1.4 billion in Ondo Finance. Ondo could be regarded as the largest play in the real world asset space. Because yes, there is Chainlink, yes, there is Stellar, but those are not pure RWA plays. And I think we can also exclude the stablecoin by BlackRock. So really, Ondo is number one with a market cap of 2.4 billion. The whole space saw a massive setback when one of the formerly biggest RWA tokens suddenly crashed massively. I'm of course talking about MantraDAO. Still, up to this day, nobody clearly has shown what has happened there. Who benefited from that crash? So this is what I'm talking about, right? This is the own price MantraDAO. It used to be one of the largest real-world asset plays, and it moved from roughly $7 to now 25 cents. Due to that crash, it's somewhere now at the bottom of that list over here. From once several billions of market cap now to only a bit over 200 million. And so obviously there is more risk involved in altcoins, right? We take on more risk, we need to get more performance long term. So let's have a look at some relative valuation charts of Ondo. Does it make sense to get into Ondo long term? Is there potentially a stable trading range that might indicate where we could bounce? Now here's a not so pretty chart. This is the Ondo dominance. So how much of all of crypto is in Ondo? The chart starts at the end of January of this year. And so far it went down by roughly 40%. But this really only shows the recent development. What we've got over here is Ondo Finance relative to Bitcoin. So we're again comparing two prices. And since the beginning of 2024, so over the last 1.5 years, Ondo Finance did outperform by 40%. There are not too many altcoins that have been able to perform better than Bitcoin over such a long period. Of course, there has been a lot of volatility as well. But maybe that's the opportunity, right? Maybe we can see one more time a rally of more than 100%. This is a chart that might suggest that this is a buying opportunity. This is now Ondo Finance relative to Ethereum. Now, Ondo Finance is listed on Ethereum. The token is on the Ethereum blockchain. And so there's obviously some correlation of Ethereum and the Ondo price. We have been bottoming out at the current level already 3 times. And we are very close to that again. And the potential upside is around 100%. At least that's what happened in November, December 2024. But of course, all of this is just imaginary lines. Nobody knows if this will hold. Let's have a look at the on-chain data. Let's see who's buying and selling here. Now on the Ethereum chain, we've got 142,829 wallets that hold the token. But not all of those wallets are created equal, right? Some of them might just hold a few cents worth of the token, while others hold hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of the token. So let's dive into this in a bit more detail. We see that the number of buyers and sellers tended to grow until the end of February of this year. And since then, we rather see a decline. The ratio of buyers versus sellers over time also tended to rather worsen. Here's the number of new users per day over time. So how many wallets that have never interacted with Ondo Finance are suddenly adding the token to their wallet in the last month. That tended to trend down. The ratio of returning users to new users is also rather in favor of the returning users. So the investor base isn't expanding that quickly anymore. But actually, we can differentiate between the number of retail investors and whale investors. And we do this by looking at minimum holding threshold. So how many tokens are held in a particular wallet? On the left side, that's 1,000 Ondo tokens. So at the current price, that's $773. For the chart in the middle, that's 10,000 tokens, so a 10x from the left. On the right, another 10x, so 100,000 tokens. So that's almost $100,000 worth of the token. We can see how the accumulation is the most constant for the small retail investor and how it tends to be less constant for the whales. The whales sometimes sell off. But what's interesting about those charts is that as per tendency, they go up, but the price does not. How can the investor base always grow when the price is going from above $2 to below 75 cents? The answer to the puzzle is tokenomics. So over time, we see more and more Ondo tokens that get unlocked, and that unlocked supply gets sold off. And the first unlock was the most severe one, where we went from 1.4 billion Ondo tokens to 3.4 billion. So more than a doubling of the supply. The next unlock, which will happen in January of 2026, it will also increase the supply. But since those are linear steps, relatively speaking, the increase isn't as much, right? It's only around 50%. Each unlock has the same number of tokens, but relatively to the circulating supply at the time, it's smaller and smaller. And so it has less impact on the price. And so that then begs the question, will the accumulation by the holders outpace the growth of the circulating supply? If the answer is yes, then Ondo might be able to outperform. If the answer is no and the growth stalls, then Ondo will continue to underperform. The supply more than doubled, it almost tripled in the last year, and so did the number of holders as well. That's why we have somewhat of a balance in the price. But really, fundamentally, the issue is that prices do develop with attention. And attention moves from project to project, and there's always new competition popping up. There's always new tokens that get launched. Have a look at the top tokens in the year 2015. So this is now 10 years ago. Of course, Bitcoin is at number 1, but we've got a lot of tokens nobody talks about anymore. We've got the Bytecoin and Namecoin, MadeSafeCoin, Banks, Peercoin, Next, Dash and Stellar were still able to hold up somewhat, but BitShares not really. So a lot of the tokens are not relevant anymore. Compare this to the ranking today, right? There's still Bitcoin at number 1, but most tokens that were relevant in 2015 aren't relevant anymore. And so since there's no regulation within crypto, everybody can launch a coin. And so the capital dilutes across more and more projects over time. The likelihood of buying an altcoin and holding it over 5 or 10 years to then outperform Bitcoin is extremely low. And so in crypto, we cannot follow the same approach that we use for other asset classes. In stocks, we can just buy 10 or 20 stocks, diversify and be somewhat safe, somewhat get a good return. But long-term holding with a diversified portfolio doesn't work in crypto, again because of the market dynamics. Have a look at the top 10 NASDAQ 100, so technology stocks in the US in the year 2015 and today. Apple was at number 1, then followed Microsoft, then Google. We've also got Facebook and Amazon included here, and all of those values are still relevant today. Yes, we've got some new names that rose quickly, Nvidia for example, or Tesla or Netflix. But even the quote-unquote losers that fell out of the top 10 are still relevant to a degree today, right? Cisco, Oracle, Qualcomm, Comcast, they still made some money, which cannot be said for Peercoin or Banks or MadeSafeCoin or BitShares. The reason why most people get into altcoins is for those potential high returns, right? Those 10x or 100x returns. We don't have that much capital available. We need a lot of return, and so we are okay with the risk. That's the idea. But have a look at the return of those smaller altcoins in the last year. So this is now the altcoins between market rank 900 and 1000. So the very small altcoins with most upside potential in theory. In the last year, they all went down. It's all red And by not so little, right? This is minus 90%, minus 80%, minus 94%. You pretty much burnt your money with those tokens. And the problem is that once we look at the performance relative to Bitcoin over longer periods, the charts look all eerily similar. Again, it's because of token dilution. Especially the small projects have very aggressive token dilution. What we see over here is the balancer decentralized finance protocol relative to Bitcoin. But here's the thing, we can actually take advantage of this. We can flip this thing around. Everything that becomes red can turn green, everything that's green can turn red. We can actually get the odds in our favor. Instead of buying balancer and competing with Bitcoin, we can buy Bitcoin and short balancer. And then we get a chart like this. It's explosive growth. We basically get the returns that the insiders are getting, right? If early investors buy into a token and then they sell off their supply, the token tends to underperform, but we can make money from that underperformance as well and get this return. I've done it myself. So this is my personal portfolio return. It's noted here in months. So this is now running for a bit under 4 years. Had I just dollar cost averaged into Bitcoin, I would have gotten this light gray line. But instead, I dollar cost averaged into a portfolio that also did relative valuation bets like this. And thus my long-term return was much, much higher. And really the risk overall isn't that much higher. It is not as obvious as just buying a single asset and keeping it running. We have to do a bit of financial engineering, but it's definitely worth it. I have made several tutorial videos on the topic. How to win in bear markets by shorting altcoins, how to gain from relative valuations, how to use perpetual futures on hyperliquid to bet on relative valuation. And of course, I'm also addressing the elephant in the room, how to do proper risk management with all of that. You might have heard of the idea of a short squeeze, right? When people bet on falling prices of something that they might get squeezed out because of market manipulation. There are ways to protect ourselves from that though. And that's explained in this video. That's how this long-term performance gets generated in the first place. So yeah, individual trades look very impressive as in their percentage returns. This has been posted by one of our members here. But of course, you don't want to bet your entire portfolio on a single trade. It's more about generating that nice long-term alpha and not hoping to pick the needle in the haystack. Right? We want to get the odds in our favor. We want to basically be like a casino. The casino cannot know either where a particular game will end. The casino knows that the odds are in the favor, as in if we increase the sample size, if we increase the number of trades, if we have the right positions, we can beat the average market participant, right? We're just flipping this overview here. Everything that's red becomes green, everything that's green becomes red. And there's the reason with all of those insiders cashing out why we get these constant underperformances. And I hope that you didn't get burnt too much in the last months. If you did, it might make sense to change strategies and not just buy and hold a basket of altcoins. So feel free to check it out. It's currently $125 per month. You can just binge watch all the tutorials and learn as much as possible. If you, of course, want to copy trade me, if you want to do the exact same trades that I do, then you can just move along long term as well. No problem with that either. A link to premium should appear over here directly on the screen. Just click on that link and it will lead you directly to the sign up page. If it's your first time over here, feel free to subscribe. I publish this regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. See you again here on YouTube or see you in premium. Cheers.